A socially just education can occur when schools fulfil their private and public purposes to prepare young people to be competent and productive workers, as well as informed and active citizens who seek to build a better and more just world. In this video, we ask the question, how does school autonomy or decentralisation promote or undermine this vision of social justice? We report on some of the findings from our 3-year study that explored school autonomy and social justice in Australian public education across 3 Australian states. We interviewed over 42 key education stakeholders and over 65 teachers, principals and admin staff in a range of schools. We asked them how free they felt to pursue justice in their schools in a broader policy context where school autonomy or decentralisation tends to be positioned as an unalloyed good, as Professor Barry McGaw from the University of Melbourne states. What is school autonomy? There's strong consensus in contexts such as Australia, England, Sweden and the United States that greater school autonomy is good for schools, that it frees up schools to respond to local concerns, to be innovative and to drive up academic standards. In Australia, there's been lots of state and federal policies that seek to support schools to be more autonomous, from a range of self-managing school policies in Victoria, the Local Schools Local Decisions Initiative in New South Wales, to the independent public schools policies in Queensland and Western Australia. The following presents 3 key findings from our research that relate to the social justice impacts of school autonomy reform. Finding 1. School autonomy does not necessarily lead to more socially just schooling. Consistent with other research, we found that greater school autonomy within marketised education systems undermines social justice. A market logic of economic rationalism, competition, choice and external accountability undermines equity across public education systems. It privileges some schools while marginalising others. The adverse impacts of competition and choice on schools were evident in 2 of our secondary case study schools. Newstall College, a senior secondary school for years 11 and 12, and Eastfell High, a nearby senior secondary school for years 7 to 12. Newstall College caters to high-achieving students who generally take a university entrance pathway. It is selective entry and able to offer a broad curriculum for students. Eastfell High is located nearby and caters to students from marginalised class and cultural backgrounds. At the senior level of this school, many high-achieving students move to Newstall College because of the targeted and quality programs it offers. The market logic of competition and choice means that university pathway students leave Eastfell High. This drift undermined Eastfell's capacity to offer a similar range of programs for their senior students and led to falling enrolments, residualisation and financial precarity. Finding 2. School autonomy does not necessarily lead to greater teacher autonomy. As Meredith Peace from the Australian Education Union states, I think in terms of the status of the profession, school autonomy can and does undermine teacher professional autonomy. Teaching has and is becoming increasingly prescriptive with more accountability and higher workloads. There's much greater focus on targets and test results. It's impacting on the health and well-being of staff, it implies less trust of the staff, it stifles creativity and takes the fun out of teaching. In general, the combining forces of marketisation and devolution within education systems has increased the workload and decreased the professional autonomy of teachers. School autonomy devolves responsibility and power to school principals. How teachers experience this autonomy is highly dependent on how principals operate. At one of the case study schools in our research, there were conditions that undermined teacher professional autonomy. At this large secondary school situated in a disadvantaged area, teachers expressed feeling disempowered and as lacking professional autonomy. With the aim of improving teacher performance and student outcomes, the executive leadership team had instated prescriptive and standardised forms of professional learning and monitoring into a strictly regulated timetable for teachers. Many of the teachers expressed feeling disempowered and micromanaged by these measures and not trusted to do their job. Some expressed concern that these measures took them away from meaningful professional learning and their day-to-day task, thus intensifying their workload. Finding 3. School autonomy reform within a context of marketisation has placed undue pressure on school principals without the necessary system supports. School autonomy within the public education system has meant a devolution of responsibility, especially in relation to management and administration, previously the remit of the state, to schools themselves. With less support from the state, principals find themselves spending increasing time on managerial and compliance tasks, rather than leading teaching and learning in their schools. While most principals and school leaders welcome the freedoms associated with school autonomy, the greater risk and responsibility devolved to them, coupled with the ever-increasing demands of audit and accountability, have produced unprecedented workload intensity. Consistent with decades of research, our study highlighted the issue of principal workload intensity. Participants noted the heavy price to the health and well-being of principals, where increasing workloads and increased student and parent violence led to untenable stress levels. Many of the stakeholders commented on the difficulty the education systems encountered finding school leaders with adequate experience and ability to manage schools, especially in rural and remote areas. Most of the stakeholders expressed great concern about the plight of inexperienced principals trying to manage their schools, and especially managing large budgets, amid the pressures and expectation of current systems. So how do we move forward? It is a myth that greater school autonomy is an unalloyed good. It is always situated within governance systems which enable and constrain the capacity of schools to pursue social justice. It is clear from our study and others that education systems driven by the market imperatives of economic efficiency, competition, choice and public accountability have further entrenched inequalities between schools. This market logic, as we saw with our case study schools, privileges some schools and marginalises others, and enforces a hierarchical tiering of public schools. These imperatives compromise the capacity of schools to fulfil their social justice goals. They shift the focus of schools away from quality teaching and learning. Systems can support public schools to mobilise their autonomy in socially just ways by ensuring funding equity across education systems so that all students can access a high-quality education, no matter who they are or where they live, reducing competition between schools through lessening the focus on narrow external accountabilities and increasing the focus on social, physical health and well-being outcomes, increasing systemic support for professional collaboration across schools to share resources and innovation rather than competing for students and staff, and strengthening zoning policy so that all public schools serve their local communities and so that competition between schools for students is reduced. In relation to teachers' work and professional autonomy, systems must do more to alleviate workload through greater resourcing focused on teaching and learning rather than management and administration. We know, for example, that under some school autonomy policies, there's been increases in funding for non-teaching staff, much more than for teaching staff. This situation indicates that currently resources could be better focused on teaching and learning. Schools must also be better supported to shift their focus from external surveillance forms of accountability to internally driven forms of professional accountability focused on improving student learning. In relation to principals' work, there's an urgent need to lessen workload intensity, to shift the focus away from administration and management towards pedagogic leadership, to reflect a more balanced relationship between the system and the school for the responsibilities and risks associated with school improvement and outcomes. But as Meredith Peace notes, it will also involve having different conversations about what is expected of principals, as their role is clearly untenable. For schools to reach their social justice goals, the market imperatives driving education systems must be transformed so that schools are funded equitably and they are not in competition with each other for students and resources. To reach these goals, teachers and principals need to be respected as professionals and adequately supported to enhance the academic and social outcomes of all students.